Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack.
You know who I can do without? I can do without the people in the video store.
Which ones?
All of them. They never rent quality flicks. They always pick the most intellectually devoid movie on the racks.
And now, on with the show.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to Loose Cannon, only on ThisWeekInGeek.net. I am one of your video store clerks for this lovely Friday evening. I'm Mike the Birdman, the manager around these parts, but I'm not alone as you browse the video aisles of this cavalcade, whatever that word is. Cavalcade of crap that we most often have on this show, but sometimes we do find some good stuff. We have our resident video expert who finds really bizarre things.
Alex, at this point, am I the producer or am I like the finder?
You're like the archivist of like this stuff.
Yeah, like am I the archaeologist of film? Is that what we are here?
Archaeologist of filth.
Archaeologist of filth. That's okay. We'll go with that. I'm the I'll find a way to shorten that to something maybe a little more funny, but archaeologist of filth. What do you do? That's not dirt on his hands. But yes, it is I, Alex.
And of course, joining us from the Grand City, which I just found out is a tactical nuclear target.
Well, a tertiary target, but I'm Aaron Pollyea.
So yes, guys, we are here back on Loose Cannon. This is the podcast on ThisWeekInGeek.net dedicated to all sorts of strange things that may have come in the big box video aisles of the 1970s and 80s and into the 90s, or might have ended up direct to DVD at some point. We try to avoid the blockbusters.
Your B and C movies, drive-ins, theatrical, all the stuff, all the fun stuff that people forgotten.
Exactly. So we love to have fun on this show. Sometimes we do some reviews here and there, but more often than not, we try and discover things to expand our palate, sort of our cinematic junk food. Sometimes it's really good. Sometimes it's really bad. Today's is kind of a mixed menu, I will say. So Alex, without any further ado, our archaeologist of filth, introduce us to our two films we'll be talking about today.
Well, we are continuing on our buddy cop extravaganza where I went, hey, let's see, what can we find? Because in the 80s, you had your staples, you had your 48 hours, you had your Lethal Weapons. And
Stakeout.
That was, as far as like in huge popularity, you got those two franchises and then you got some other ones peppered in. And then, you go into the 90s where it feels like for a lot of us, Rush Hour was sort of where that peaked, right? And then there's this period of mid 80s to mid 90s where so many tried to replicate what those famous films had done, and so many of them failed. A lot of them went to theaters. In fact, everything we're talking about has been in a theatrical run at some point, and they're lost to the annals of time, or maybe on a movie network back 20 years ago, but probably not. So this time we have Running Scared and Dead Heat. We'll start off with Running Scared. It's from 1986. This was a major motion picture release from MGM. And it apparently was a pretty significant hit at the time. For 1986, this movie made just shy of about $40 million domestically. I couldn't find anywhere what the film cost to make, but it looked rather high budget for the era.
Sure.
It
did. That's not me being sarcastic.
Yeah, like if I had to place a guess, this was probably in the realm of $3 to $5 million budget.
Yeah, it was filmed in Chicago, so that's not cheap. I mean, big chunks of it were filmed in Chicago.
I mean, there is a stunt in this movie where they go on the L train, and I've actually been on the L train once in my life, and I was filming a video about 15 years ago, and you don't really get how big that is. I mean, us up here in Canada, certain cities up here have giant subway systems, but because of the way that the L train is kind of set up, it's it's a lot of it's above ground, so you can see it going through the city, and it's really cool. And the video game Watch Dogs, the first game happens in Chicago, if I remember right. And you can see all sorts of really cool thing, how there's like the bridges that lift up in the city and whatnot. There's
if you remember Blues Brothers, when they're driving at like 120 miles an hour through the streets of Chicago at the end, they're actually driving right underneath an L track.
Yeah, and
a chunk of it.
Yeah, like it's really cool to see. I mean, as far as infrastructure goes, I guess, but still, yeah, like this movie, it's so weird because we talk about it in our little social chat we have to discuss what we're going to talk about during the upcoming shows, and Aaron had said something that struck me as really, really, really interesting, and I couldn't shake this while I was watching this, and then I guess we'll go into the plot about this. My initial thought was like, when Aaron had said this, it rung so true. This is the most 80s movie trying to fit a checklist. Like, it starts off with a theme song, so check one.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not trying to cut you off. I actually made notes for this. You know me, I don't usually make notes. The first note I have is this is 1980s the movie.
Yeah, it's so weird. It hits so many check marks. Like there's a buddy cop dynamic. Like even the way that the characters are written, they feel like, okay, one of them has to be a black cop, and it's just the way that Gregory Hines plays that role. I don't know. It's like you are meant to be the super funny guy. And then Billy Crystal, okay, you were on Saturday Night Live. You're a stand-up comedian. You're known to be a funny dude. You get cast because we see the success of other SNL cast members who have gone on to done pretty big things in the 80s. Obviously, I'm looking at like Eddie Murphy, to a lesser extent, Joe Piscopo, who we'll talk about in our next movie. And I just thinking, okay. And then I just remember, I think even during the intro, when they're running the Running Scared theme song, I think they openly put the advertisement for the soundtrack on the screen right away.
Yes.
It was right at the end of the movie too. It's like soundtrack available on MCA cassettes and vinyl. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, guys, at least let the credits roll.
Well, I'll say this. The music was great.
Oh, yeah.
So when I said that this is 80s buddy cop film, that could mean this is the best 80s buddy cop film.
Which it is not.
It is not. Well, how I meant it was, this is the Pabst Blue Ribbon of beer. That and I don't mean that as an insult.
It's not the old Milwaukee. It's the Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Well, see, what I mean is that it doesn't do anything spectacular, but it isn't really offensive. It just is. This is beer.
For our Canadian listeners, it's the Laker beer.
Yeah, like you could put a white label with black text on it that said beer. That perfectly describes it.
We actually have that. We have the President's Choice owned No Name brand, which is a yellow label that just says beer.
Can we send that to Aaron? Like legally?
If he comes up here, I don't think you could send it to him. You can't send a liquor over. You can't mail liquor to somebody but if you come over the border, you can pick it up for yourself.
At some point when I get my passport set,
it literally just says beer.
Yeah, but do you see what I'm saying about this movie? This could be just a white label with black text that said 80s buddy cop film.
Yes, and I can tell you sort of the feel for that. I don't know about the writing aspect, but the director, I recognize the name. He also did his own cinematography for it, which is a little more rare, I think, in the 80s than now. Sometimes you'll see directors do both, but Peter Hyams, and I was like, I know that name. Director of Capricorn 1, directed and wrote Outland.
Okay. I know Capricorn 1.
Outland is I think that's the Sean Connery one where he's a cop in space on a mining planet. He did 2010, the sequel to 2001. He was the executive producer of Monster Squad. He directed the Presidio. He directed Time Cop, Sudden Death, the Relic, End of Days, The Musketeer, A Sound of Thunder, And he's done like 2 or 3 movies with Jean-Claude Van Damme, which is where I think I know him. Obviously, the Time Cop and Sudden Death, those are the ones I knew him from. So he is one of the quintessential 80s and 90s action directors. And as far as, also feeling like 80s buddy cop the movie, it's the cast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
You got Joe Pantoliano as Snake. Who I don't think I've ever seen him with hair.
I have, and I think he was on another movie that we did not too recently too. Like he showed up.
Jimmy Smits in like the youngest I've ever seen him.
Yeah,
as Julio Gonzalez. Dan Hedaya playing a good guy, sort of. I mean, Dan Hedaya is never a good guy. In pretty much anything he's in, there's always some feeling that he might be a bad guy. But him playing Captain Logan.
Now, Alex, there is something that I just found out about this because you're talking about the director and some of the cast. I want to talk about the writer of this movie because this is fucked up. His name was Gary DeVore, and he passed away in 1997 at the age of 55. Not in itself strange, right? So DeVore disappeared in June of 1997 while driving at night from Santa Fe, New Mexico to Santa Barbara.
It's this guy. Okay, yeah.
So
okay.
basically, so long story short, he was complaining of writer's block. So he decided, you know what? I'm going to get a change of scenery. I'm going to go find some place to write. And he called his wife and said, hey, I'm going to meet you at our house somewhere in California. I'll see you in a little bit, right? So anyway, he didn't come to his wife's beachfront home. So she called him. The phone call was not recorded by the phone company, but okay. So at 1 a.m., there was no contact. So that was the last time they ever spoke. So a year later, he and his car were discovered submerged below a bridge over the aqueduct in Palmdale, California. Once the police had retrieved his vehicle from the water, it was found that his laptop contained the script titled The Big Steal. His hands and his gun were missing. This was considered very suspicious as the aqueduct was searched when the disappearance was reported and it had shown no signs of impact. Police concluded that DeVore crashed his vehicle in this location meant he would have had to drive 3 miles, 4.8 kilometers against traffic without being seen. This would have been doubly difficult because the vehicle's lights were not switched on. Gary DeVoe's murder has never been solved to date.
He also did uncredited rewrites on The Relic.
Yeah,
so that's another Relic connection.
Yeah.
And Pentathlon, like I'm looking at his stuff, like there's obviously they could make a movie about his life, even when you think about it. But he wrote Raw Deal, probably the
Jim
one
Belushi movie?
Nope.
Jim Belushi?
Nope, that's you're thinking of Red Heat.
That's it. Yeah, you're right.
Raw Deal is the one Arnold movie that almost everybody doesn't know he made. Because it came out, I think it was the same year as Running Man or right before it, and after Commando. And it's the one Arnold movie he made in the 80s that wasn't for a major studio. So he did that one. Showdown in Little Tokyo. Probably my favorite movie that's under 90 minutes long. That's the what's his name? Dolph Lundgren and Brandon Lee movie.
You showed me the trailer for that.
Yeah. That's a fun, like, I mean, it's like 74 minutes long. Like it's almost like it's missing part of the plot, but it's a breeze to watch. Pentathlon, he did that with Dolph as well. Passenger 57. And in looking through this stuff, I've made a mental note that we're going to have to probably track down the movie called Tracks because that looks amazing. We'll look at that later. I'll show you, Mike. But yeah, like it has all these pieces that you think would make for, a great movie, and it still is 80s the movie, this film. But like there are moments in this that are pretty meta for the time. Like there's multiple references to Terminator, which was only like 2 years old at this point.
That is kind of weird.
Like at the time, that wasn't a common thing to reference movies from another company, or to even reference a movie in itself, and unless it was unless they were talking about a movie from the 40s or something in the 80s.
Sure.
Like Billy Crystal mimics Arnold's voice a couple times, does an "I'll be back" line. Even there's even a moment where he puts on a trench coat like his, and the music changes to Terminator style music for a few seconds. And it's almost like they were thinking on the fly and just put bits in, and then they altered the music to make it sound like it. Like the shootout that happens way later in the film in the mall, some of the music, obviously it's a little more techno-y, a little more synthy sounding, but there's moments where they shot things to look like Terminator. I'm like, what the is this a case of Peter Hyams being pissed that he didn't make Terminator or something?
Maybe.
Because
I thought it was weird that they chose to film in Chicago, and then they decided to spray everything with shaving cream rather than fake snow. Did you notice that?
Yes. I noticed that. That was strange.
It was very strange.
The dialogue that he has throughout the entire film, the two leads have, it's almost like it's a similar thing to what we saw in Number One with the Bullet, where the lines themselves are fine. The delivery of these lines were too fast. It's they're saying things back and forth. The pacing at which there's no overlap in their talking. It's an unnatural line delivery for almost every quip they have to each other.
There was something that I actually did a little bit of digging into this. I remember the director that you mentioned. What was his name? Peter Hyams?
Yeah.
He'd mentioned that the guy who played Ray, Gregory Hines, had mentioned he was difficult to work with, and it's not because he was bad or anything. It's because when he worked with Billy Crystal, from what Billy Crystal said, he would do improvising during rehearsals, but also do some during takes, and that would throw off the director. But Hines could keep up with him, so they could keep the natural flow of the scene. So when Hyams wanted to cast this movie, he didn't want your typical Eddie Murphy or Arnold Schwarzenegger or Stallone or whatever. He didn't want to make Police Academy with the Terminator, is the impression that I get. But these guys could keep up with each other from an improvisational school of acting. And that's why you're right, Alice. It's that pacing. It's that weird da-da-da-da-da-da. It just happens.
It's because it might be natural, or it might in person have felt a little natural, but it was almost as if they didn't know how to make the cuts or make the edits fit in with the pacing of the rest of the film.
Yeah. I think they've got wonderful chemistry. I think if you told me there was going to be a Running Scared 2 where they help continue to clean up Chicago, it may have been a direct-to-video, or, it may be released a couple years later. I might have watched it.
If you handed it over to a Richard Donner from Lethal Weapon or something, it might have been better.
What about the guy who did Beverly Hills Cop 2?
Actually, you know what? The pacing? You mean Tony Scott?
Yeah, if you could get
Tony Scott, probably would have been able to work better with how because this film has a certain deliberate pace in the way it's shot. It's shot like an 80s movie, but the speed at which they quip back and forth compared to when they make their cuts for their angles and everything, it's more this is almost like Rush Hour dialogue, but in a slower movie.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it too. And another thing that I also noticed about this, and Aaron will probably back me up on this, because I have a fascination with firearms. I noticed in two of the movies that we're talking about today, everybody in the 1980s uses Uzis or
mini Uzis.
Yeah, it's I guess at the time
or a homemade pirate gun.
It's so weird. I really wonder if armorers during the 1980s who are working with these certain companies, like Fox, I know they shared an armor for Predator, because that sniper rifle shows up somewhere else, but the M60 that's used in that movie is Rambo's M60. Like, I can screen match it, I think.
Well, yeah, there's lots of shared armorers in Hollywood. I mean, even to this day.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also that there's a reason why specific guns end up being shown far more often, and it's because the arms manufacturer will go to Hollywood and promote their guns.
Which is so weird, like Uzis of all
look
things.
how much. Look, we want all of our guns in the hands of every bad criminal in your movies, killing as many people as possible.
Well,
Yeah.
it's the one big example I can give is Desert Eagle. Why are there Desert Eagles in all these different movies? Because they are giant, unwieldy guns that are far, far too large to be used as a practical handgun.
You know,
and then you see the heckler.
A significant chunk of the budget for the movie Year of the Dragon, the Michael Cimino directed Mickey Rourke movie, was provided by the company that makes Desert Eagle, because that was the first film to ever show it, and it was his personal gun. In the movie, when he gets his wife gets killed in their house and yada yada yada, he runs after the bad guy, and his police issued pistol stops working. He grabs the Desert Eagle, runs outside, shoots through the back of a car, and the guy's head explodes. And it was out of place for how realistic the rest of the film was, but they prominently show the Desert Eagle, and it was apparently a significant chunk of the budget was provided by the company for that. So yeah, I can believe it.
But the other thing about Uzis, especially in the 1980s, is that it was easy to get a hold of semi-automatic Uzis in the US, and it was trivial for armorers to convert them into full auto blank fires.
Yeah, like I think you just had to change one or two parts or remove something, and it was like
so it was very, very cheap to suddenly get a very realistic looking firearm that could fire blanks at incredible rates of fire.
And I guess we should plot-wise mention this is your standard buddy cop movie. Two semi-undercover cops are trying to track where drugs are coming in to a neighborhood. They find a drug dealer that
Mr. Snake
and Jimmy Smits, who they put away in prison a few years prior, and he's already out, and somehow he's driving around in rich people cars and has rich people clothes when he shouldn't be able to have that. And
that's classist, huh?
And it devolves into standard. There's going to be corruption. There's going to be shootings, and girlfriends are going to be kidnapped, and all this. Although they sprinkle in as many jokes as they can, the leads appear to be having a lot of fun together. Whether or not, obviously, like you said, they got along with the directors is a different story.
Can I make one observation, though, about how this is not a standard buddy cop movie? Both the buddy cops are entirely unlikable as characters.
Yeah.
They are awful human beings who routinely flout justice. They are terrible police officers.
They joke about, like, and you believe that they're not even joking, but they're pretending they're joking. They're like, should we just kill them now? Like, and you're like, wait.
It seems like they're being real about it.
Yeah, like they're joking. They'll joke about murdering suspects because they're like, it's like easier to kill them than to do the paperwork of arresting them.
But the thing is, their boss, whoever, the chief, actually does also know that they are awful cops, and they're continually written up for breaking policy and laws. That a lot of these arrests get thrown out because of unnecessary brutality.
The line that sticks out in my
crap.
head when they're supposed to be teaching the younger detectives, he tells them, the line is, "I want you to teach them everything you know, so they know what not to do."
And it's played as if it's funny, but if you watch this movie with like a semi-critical eye, these cops should be in prison.
These cops,
oh God, yeah.
These cops don't behave well. I guess they behave like Chicago cops. They behave more like modern day, like Baltimore cops than they do anywhere else.
I think they act more like actual gang members that just have a badge. Like that's what they come across as to me, at least. Like, these are not professional police officers. These are criminals that use a badge to commit crimes. Like, crimes against other people, and it's played for laughs, but it's not really funny if you're watching this as a critical, with even a semi-critical eye.
This is
If
one
you're
of
just
the
watching this as like a dumb comedy, sure, it works perfectly, but holy crap, they do some pretty awful, terrible things.
they shoot first more in this movie than I've seen in movies about police corruption.
Well, look at what they do to the one guy that has $50,000 in his briefcase. They like announce to everyone in the neighborhood that this guy has $50,000 in his briefcase, and there's no locks on the doors that can't be broken down with a swift kick. Like, oh my God.
They're asking like, "Hey, come kill him. It's not our problem."
Yeah, that is holy crap.
And obviously the profiling in this is off the chain.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
That's the
fact
only
that
thing to me that really kind of pulls off the standard buddy cop thing.
the fact that certain movies have this fascination with drug dealers from South America in the 1980s, because that was the de facto bad guy for like years, and then it became Arab terrorists in the 90s, and then 2000s I guess it was Russians were hot again, because guaranteed we are going to come across a movie that has a bad guy named of Gonzalez, Rodriguez, Mendoza, or Escobar, because, you know, why not? It's always these stereotypical names, and just Jimmy Smits does not come across to me as a Gonzalez to me, and I don't know if
He
that's
was also
profiling.
too young. He was too young to be like the leader at this point.
Yeah, I mean, unless he had a particularly bloody way, like crawling to the top, yeah, I'm not buying it. Like, he looks too nice. I don't know. I don't buy him in this role.
You have to watch Dexter, where he plays a great character, but that's also 25 years later, almost 30 years later. So, like he's a great actor, and I was happy to see him. I was happy to see a lot of the character actors in this.
The guy who plays the mechanic, I've seen him in so much. The guy that plays Ace.
Okay, the guy who plays the mechanic. You know where you've seen him, Mike? And
Seinfeld?
No, maybe. Oh, yes, maybe as there. But where I think you would have seen him for sure is in UHF.
Oh, he's the inventor dude, right?
He's the guy that cuts his thumb off.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
Isn't he the guy that goes like, "Oops, oopsie," and he's like cutting his thumb off and it's bleeding everywhere? But it's either he's either that guy or he's another guy that looks exactly like him.
What's the character name? I'm sorry. I'm like
Ace.
Oh man,
he was the guy that was buffing out the car. In this,
I don't know, for whatever reason I'm blanking.
It's fine. It was a face I instantly recognized as well, but I couldn't.
It's his voice that caught
because UHF is one of my favorite movies.
Oh yeah.
In UHF, it's the guy that has he's got like the woodworking show or something, and he cuts his thumb off with like a bandsaw or something like that, and it's bleeding everywhere. And he's like, "Oh, Butterfingers, look at me."
Oh, and he talks super slow. Yeah, I know the guy you mean.
And he's got.
I don't think that's the same guy.
He squirts his face with blood, and he's like, "Isn't my face red?"
I don't think that's the same guy.
Not okay. If it's not him, then
because I don't think that the actor that was in this is in UHF.
Let me look it up real fast.
Okay, if it's not him, then this is the guy.
Because Philo was Anthony Geary. Okay. From UHF. I know that.
Then is this the guy? What is that?
Just call me Mr. Butterfingers. It's Emo Phillips that does that.
Okay, you're right. Now, is this guy? Does he play like a butler?
Larry Hankin was his name.
Was he a butler, or is he a guy that had like a weird funny laugh in like a Sandler movie maybe or something?
Maybe he was in Breaking Bad pretty recently. I'm looking through his thing, that stuff that we would know him
Scroll
from.
to the mid 2000s.
He was in Old Joe for Breaking Bad. He was in the El Camino movie. Going to the mid 2000s. Let me go through here. My Name is Earl. He was in an episode. Okay. Monk, Malcolm in the Middle. Gacy.
What's his name again?
Larry Hankin.
Larry Hankin. It's definitely a guy I know from stuff.
Yeah, because he's been in a ton of things.
Yeah, like he is one of those character
It's only going
actors
to take me
you
a
would
second to figure it out.
Yeah, let me keep looking. He was in the Weird Science TV series.
Okay, he's, I think, the butler in Billy Madison.
Let me see. I'm getting to that era. He was in
Madison
Star Trek Voyager.
Carlisle
Yes, he was. He was the guy in Billy Madison.
That's who it was. Okay. Yes.
Now that we've wasted your time there, folks.
Sorry, it was one of those have to figure it out moments.
Yes.
But yes, it was neat seeing him. It was going to be a flip of a coin. It was either going to be him playing that or some other weirdo like the guy from Ghost that can push people even though he's a ghost.
He's a poltergeist.
Yeah. That guy, like he was the guy that was the professor in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That guy was always in 80s movies too. But anyway, Stephen Bauer from Scarface is in this. And actually, I did find it funny that Jimmy Smits has like a Scarface ending.
Yeah, where basically he like goes down fighting.
And he's shot like a bazillion times. But yes, lots of shooting. All the action was well staged. The special effects were all pretty well done.
Yeah.
All the stunts were really well done too.
Yeah, so, like that train car chase on the L track. That was legitimately really cool. Do not be surprised if I steal that for a game at some point, because that was just a really neat idea.
And like I said, the music was great. And I think what also put the cherry on top of it being 80s the movie was it had a theme song written for it.
Now, this is something that I noticed, and this is because I really enjoy a lot of Billy Crystal movies. In fact, one of my favorite movies, I don't know if it's a big secret or not, is the movie City Slickers. And I saw that when I was entirely too young, but it really, really stayed with me. So when they go to Danny's apartment, I think that's the character's name, they go to his apartment, he has a bunch of Chicago Cubs stuff in there. And he's for the majority of the movie, he's wearing a Chicago Cubs jersey or something. In City Slickers, the baseball hat he's wearing, I'm pretty sure, is a Chicago Cubs baseball hat. And I think there's a line in that movie where he's talking with his other friends, Daniel Stern, and I think the other character's name was Bruno something. And he says, well, do you remember the time we went to fantasy camp and we tried to be Chicago Cubs or something? And I wonder if Billy Crystal just has that in his contract, or there has to be a baseball reference in there somewhere. I mean, even in Monsters, Inc. and University, he wears a baseball cap. So
maybe he's from New York, but maybe he's just a big Chicago fan.
Yeah, it's weird. And it's
he's not wearing a Cubs. He's wearing a at the time, like the logo for the Chicago Blackhawks jersey.
Yeah, so
at the beginning, and yeah, you're right. A lot of obviously it was in Chicago, but that stood out to me. It's like hockey's not usually represented in movies in America at that time.
Yeah, and if it is, it's usually like the Detroit Red Wings or the Philadelphia Flyers. You might get the odd Boston Bruins thing, because I'm pretty sure that's what Happy Gilmore wore. I think was a Boston Bruins jersey. So yeah,
like this is like
it's
for all intents and
watchable.
Purposes a big hit. It's just they never followed up.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you never knew about. If you're from that era and you were probably about 18 or higher, you might have seen this. You might have seen it in the video store. You might have seen advertisements on this. But for people in our age, probably not. My
history with this was in 2002 or 3. I went to my local used bookstore and picked this up on VHS for $1.97. And it was I bought it entirely because it was in a cool case. It was not like a Disney clamshell case. It was a cardboard case that was oversized from 1986 or 87, where the front flap opened and there was a plastic holder for the tape, but it was oversized, almost like double the size of a VHS case would be.
Well, I think the movie poster's cool. Like, it would stand out.
Yeah, and like you have two comedians in it. I mean, why not? You think it would work? There are, like I said, references to Terminator. There's references to other movies at the time too. I just didn't itemize each one of them. It's just the Arnold one stood out because Arnold wasn't in 1986 a huge star yet.
He was rising.
'86 was his breakout year, so this would have been filmed in '85.
I think you could make an argument for Conan and the Terminator being his real breakouts.
First Conan was not like a big, like for us it's big, but it wasn't like, he wasn't a household name till '86.
Well, I mean, the writer might have just really liked Terminator.
Yeah.
Or Billy Crystal.
Yeah, or Billy Crystal.
Like, because you said he ad-libbed a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so I could totally
it's entirely possible he went and saw Terminator and was blown away by it. And he's like, I'm making an action movie. I'm making my own Terminator.
So yeah, I mean, like, my final thoughts on Running Scared, I was surprisingly entertained by it. It is a little paint by numbers, but it's not the paint by numbers you would expect so much. I mean, it's got some great kind of one-liners. It's not the typical cop story in the fact that the cop's like, you know what? I'm going to retire. This kind of sucks. Obviously, at the end, they decide not to because, we still got a city to clean up here. I guess so. And I'm going to take my ex-wife back, even though she's engaged to somebody else.
We have more people to murder without actually arresting.
Exactly. People is going to die. Yeah,
Chicago's
I loved
a
it.
big city. It's going to take a lot of bullets to clean it up.
Thank God we have Uzis. Anyway.
Yeah.
and it was weird seeing Gregory Hines trying to do like full-on action stunts where he's rappelling down like buildings and
he's the only guy who got laid in this movie, by the way.
He probably had that in his contract.
I would wonder.
But yes, I think we should probably move on to the creme de la creme here. And that is the wondrous enigma that is Dead Heat.
Dead Heat, dude.
This movie is awesome.
Movie, yeah. This movie had things in it that I wasn't really expecting, and I had joy from it. Like one of the first scenes has Robert Picardo in it.
Yep.
And every time I see Robert Picardo in a movie, it's like a bit part for him. But every time I see him, my hands are in the air and I go, woo! Because
I actually twittered at Robert last night saying, hey man, I'm watching Dead Heat and you just showed up. What a pleasant surprise.
He's third billed in the credits.
Yeah, I did see that.
Stunning.
And all I can say is, no, you're not allowed to say the F word.
Vincent Price is in this. And
that was my biggest surprise because he's not in the trailer.
Yeah, he's not in the trailer. But Vincent Price is somebody I obviously have encountered a few times for Earth versus Soup. And even before that, I love Vincent Price just because I love old sci-fi and horror movies. So
and for us, like, we grew up with reruns of The Hilarious House of Frankenstein, which you would not have gotten unless... No, you probably wouldn't have gotten. It was a show filmed in 1971. They made like 150 episodes in 1 year.
Geez. Wow.
Yeah, they flew him in to Hamilton here, and he filmed, I think, over the course of a weekend, every scene he had to make, and then the show was cut up and aired in perpetuity as a kids show from like 1971 to 2001 or 2002, and it was a play on the Frankenstein monster and Dracula, where one man named Billy Van played almost every character on screen, and it have like segments where like kids would learn science, and then they would have a storybook read to them, and there'd be like, it was all these different weird little segments where he played different characters, and Vincent Price would open up each segment, and after every commercial, he would come in and read to you and tell you stories of the different characters.
Okay.
And it was all these rhymes and riddles of him. So, and this show was on, like, every kid saw it either after school or before school started, almost every day of the week for like 25 years, even though they filmed everything in 1 year. And like growing up, that's where our generation saw him first.
Okay.
In everything. And it was like that. And then we would see bits and pieces of the old movies and that. So when I see him, to me, it's weird seeing him this old, because in my mind, he perpetually looks like he did in 1971.
Okay.
And just that's just a little backstory for me seeing it. So when I saw him pop up, my first thought was, is that Vincent Price? And then I heard the voice. I went, oh yeah, that's 100% him. This had to be one of his last, like, actually, it was his third last role that he did before he passed away. So, Yeah, because it was Edward. Didn't he die right after Edward Scissorhands? Yes. But yes. So, I was surprised he was in this because again, he was not advertised in the trailer. I don't even know where to start with the plot with this. Do you guys?
Boy, it starts like a regular kind of 80s cop movie. There's like a break-in. There's a robbery at a jewelry store, I should say. And the guys that are robbing it jump out, and our heroes come out in their like convertible car. I think they're in a convertible at that point. And they end up meeting Robert Picardo outside with a whole bunch of cops, and they say, we're going to get these guys. They've been robbing a whole bunch of jewelry stores. We can't let them get away. And these guys look like they're pretty rough up, right? They have like open sores on their faces underneath the masks, but they jump outside and the cops unload on them, and it becomes like this 5-minute long gun battle where the bank robbers just don't die. They don't die
to the point where we should say the two stars being Treat Williams, which by the way, what the hell happened to his career, and Joe Piscopo, who looked like he did all of the steroids that year. And Treat Williams decides to drive a cop car and joust with a shotgun to try to stop them.
Yeah, and he does but it's pretty screwed up. Well, I mean, to make a long story short, they end up investigating this makeup / home chemical company that has developed a chemical that can effectively bring the dead back to life as long as there is an electrical charge passed through them. And our main character is killed by like a strange mutant zombie thing. Like, there's no reason for this biker guy to have like 4 faces.
He looks like something out of Big Trouble in Little China.
You know, as a side, I honestly thought that much of the makeup in this reminded me of Night of the Comet.
Yeah, that's actually a really good thing now that you mention that.
And I wonder if the makeup artist actually did work on Night of the Comet or not. I never looked. I probably should have, now that I said that. You take over so I can look this up.
Okay. Well, I should start by saying that the feel for this movie is all over the place. It changes halfway through, but at the beginning, it has a very like B movie from the 70s feel, exploitation. And it's probably because it was produced and created by Roger Corman's New World Productions or New World Features. And those two bad guys, the masks they're wearing are like half gimp sex masks where it just covers weird. The top of their head. And they're wearing like leather masks that cover their heads. They go into the jewelry store where this old lady is trying on jewelry, and it's so odd the way she's playing towards the camera. Like, it's like she's talking to the camera when she's talking to the lady that runs the shop. They show up, the dialogue is so out there. They start shooting up at almost everything, steal the jewels, go outside, and when the cops are already there, a cop goes, "Hey, freeze," and the cop shoots the guy immediately with a shotgun without letting them freeze.
Wow.
Which I was like, Is this going to be another one of those movies? And then it was, like you said, like 700,000 bullets being shot back and forth. This is one where the buddy cop dialogue actually worked better.
Yes.
Like they were talking the way you would talk to your best friend, although they never took anything serious.
Although one of my main complaints, and this sucks because this is like my first real exposure to Joe Piscopo, and I've heard that name for years, but I never knew who he was.
I only remember him from the bad seasons of SNL.
Yeah, same here.
I remember the only thing I really remember of him is when they did the commercials for things on TV. He had like chiclet teeth or something.
I remember a weird bodybuilding sketch with him, I think. But the thing that really annoyed me, and I hated this, is he would keep delivering joke after joke, but it never gave the joke enough time to breathe because it was so rapid fire. I'm thinking, okay, you're funny, I get it. You're taking over from Treat Williams, and this is supposed to be his movie, let's be fair, because he is the main character. But then, I don't know, he just overpowered most scenes that he was in, but he was likable, though.
He was treating his role as if he was Rodney Dangerfield delivering his one-liners.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
It was so
Yeah.
weirdly rapid fire.
To me, it felt forced. His
Yeah.
comedy felt forced. And there is no connection between Night of the Comet and this, but for whatever reason, it reminded me of Night of the Comet.
I mean,
Go figure.
one of the things I like about this movie is, to be frank, everybody dies, and you never see the hero die and I guess get resurrected again. Maybe you do, I don't know. But this movie ends on kind of a downer note. We'll talk about the plot in just a minute, but I've only seen one other movie do this and end on a downer note, but kind of a hopeful note too. And that's Return of the Living Dead Part 3. So when we get to talking about the plot of the movie, I want to bring kind of that up. But I will say this. This is such a unique idea. If you were to approach this now with the quality of some of the horror comedy directors that exist now, this could work again. I really think so. Like, I thought the idea was so neat.
Well, if you got Sam Raimi to do this, of course.
Now,
Of course. This
or
would be
somebody,
amazing.
you know who could do this movie justice or a remake? Edgar Wright could do
Yes.
this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he could. Yeah, you're right.
There's there was a movie I watched yesterday. I don't know whether either of you have seen it, but it does the horror comedy so well with the quirky dialogue. Have either of you seen the movie Werewolves Within?
No, not yet.
Okay, so long story short, it's a movie about this ranger who moves to a small town, and there's been a series of animal attacks. He's the new guy in town, and he has to go out and fix problems. Then suddenly all the generators go out in town. There's a huge snowstorm. They're all trapped in. They start finding a dead body, and then they all freak out, and hilarity ensues. And it's a really damn good movie. Alex, we saw a trailer for this because it was produced by Ubisoft. This was the Ubisoft movie.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, so I think with the horror directors that can do comedy super well, like the Edgar Wrights, even Sean Pegg could take a shot at this.
You mean
This
Simon
could-
Pegg?
Simon Pegg, yeah.
Simon Pegg, sorry. I got him confused. But yeah, like, I think with the right sensibility, the right leads, this could work. Like, this was a really interesting idea. So
I think
you
it
know,
works fine as it is.
yeah.
Do you know what this gave me a feel of?
Hmm.
If it had been done or given to a different director,
Yeah.
it's almost like The Frighteners. Like
I could Peter
what's his name?
Jackson, yeah.
Peter Jackson could have done something like this.
Yeah.
Because
All right.
he had those quirky, like, I almost feel like this movie would have done better if it was Michael J. Fox and somebody else.
But also remember that this goes full Cronenberg.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll get to that.
Cronenberg.
This director, though, I just looked them up. He only ever directed 2 films. This, and right after it, he made the 1989 Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie, which it's
We've
one of
got
my
to talk about that.
it's one of my favorite 80s movies. But he's not really a director, and he also was the second unit director of RoboCop.
Okay.
But where his claim to fame is, he is like an all-star, like one of the best and most prolific 80s and 90s film editors, like head editor. He edited Piranha, the original Piranha movie.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Enter the Ninja, The Howling, Halloween 2.
Dude, Howling is great.
The Terminator. He was the main editor for James Cameron.
Okay, that's cool.
He edited Commando, Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Oh, wow.
Jumpin' Jack Flash, Inner Space, Nightbreed. He was the editor for that.
Oh, dude, Nightbreed is fantastic. We
Predator-
talked about Nightbreed on the show.
Predator 2. He was nominated for Academy Award for all his editing on Terminator 2. The Last Boy Scout. He was editor on Universal Soldier, the Super Mario Brothers movie, Tombstone, True Lies, where he was nominated again, Showgirls, The Rock, Starship Troopers, Armageddon, Detroit Rock City, Hollow Man, Pearl Harbor, Bad Boys
Wow.
2, X-Men: The Last Stand, the Wolfman, Chappie, and most recently the 2018 Death Wish remake. So he's like a superstar editor.
Okay.
So, and I guess he did so well for James Cameron and all these other guys that the studio said, yeah, you want to direct a movie? You can direct a movie, because he had just been the second unit director for Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop, which ended up being a big hit. So they're probably like, yeah, sure, you can make a movie. And they knew it was going to be edited well, which I can say it's edited well. It's not directed competently. I'll say that. This has a very B-movie feel in most parts. But then at the same time, it has a very odd feel to the film overall. It's like all over the place in tone.
Yeah, it's overly comedic with Joe Piscopo doing Joe Piscopo stuff. And then it has like Lindsay Frost as Randy James suddenly like melting into a pile of goo.
Oh my God, that scene I did not expect.
I loved it. And it was so gross. It was so gross and terrifying until it has like a hokey last few seconds. I almost feel they put
I
that
wish
on
they'd
purpose.
cut that. I wish they'd cut that.
But like I said before we started recording, I had to like pause the movie and take a break when there was the Chinese butcher scene. And that's where I felt it went full Cronenberg.
With pro wrestler Professor Tanaka.
Yes, I thought that was
of was it Three Ninjas fame?
The Running Man, where he plays Sub-Zero.
Yeah, dude.
I saw him and I'm like, oh, this has got amazing. And then it went full Evil Dead.
Yes.
See, yeah, Evil Dead's tame compared to this. This was, like I said, Cronenberg. This is
every piece of meat and corpse in the butcher shop comes to life.
Yeah, Cronenberg meets Return of the Living Dead.
It's like and a little Reanimator mixed in.
Yeah. Oh boy, oh boy.
But yes, and even some of the other people, like the other famous people, Darren McGavin's in this movie.
Love him.
What felt weird about that scene on top? I'm sorry for like talking about this damn butcher scene more, but what felt weird is this is obviously meant to be incredibly horrific, right?
Yes.
And Joe Piscopo is just cracking jokes all the way through it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I think I'm going to become a vegetarian, or, you know, maybe you should have an apple in your mouth besides, you know, my hand.
Yeah. Even when his friend's dead, he's like, yeah, you're dead. And then he's like laughing about it.
It's I think that like some of these scenes could have honestly been way more gut punching if it wasn't for Joe Piscopo constantly doing one-liners and quips.
Yeah, like that's what I mean. I mean, I get being a funny guy fairly close to the height of your career, but you're taking over the scene. And I like Joe Piscopo after this. I generally do. I found out he's like a radio DJ now for I think a couple of sports stations.
Which is funny because he was like the most hated person of that replacement cast of SNL. In the mid-80s.
I don't know. Like, and it's just so unfortunate that a lot of things, like Aaron had just said, that could have been really emotionally weighty are like, oh, well, at least you're dead. You don't have to pay taxes again. And don't worry, you don't have a pulse. What are they going to do?
And so the special effects was pretty good. Like, obviously. Yeah. And some of the effects on some of the zombies is like, eh. And then some of it, especially the girl melting scene. Like the time lapse on her hand when it starts to decay is cool. And then when her face droops, I was like, oh man, they must have got the people that did like The Thing or something to do that. Because
Rob Bottin, yeah.
And she just melts away. But then she melts away, and we have the terrible cringe scene where her skull moves and starts talking to him, even though there's no, flesh or voice box. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, blah blah blah. Forgive me. And then a really bad hand drawn rotoscoped like melting of whatever was left. And I was like, if you had cut that last part out, it could have been a serious like drama horror.
Yeah, like that's what I wanted. Like I remember watching that scene because I watched this late last night, and I was like, oh man, if you just cut the last 10 seconds, you could have gotten her voice where she says, I'm sorry, but if you just cut the forgive me, it would have been fine.
And
Just that last few
the
seconds.
main plot, the main, I guess, motivation of this is that Vincent Price is a super rich dude who invented this device that keep you alive. He wants to have immortality as he's aging, and he wants to sell immortality to super rich billionaire people like him. And
which is fairly realistic. I get it. Like if somebody built an immortality device, of course, you know, the super rich are going to be the ones to get it.
Yeah, because he needs funding to keep the device running, basically. Yeah. And the idea is if you hook the super rich with it, they're already super rich. You'll have an unlimited stream of funding to keep your research going.
I mean, it does take power to keep the Tesla coils going.
Yeah, and the idea being if you shut down the machine after you've already made those people or technically immortal, it's like a drug. He has to keep providing the service, and they'll need to keep paying to keep it running. So yeah, cool. And then we have a shootout with one of my favorite bad guy deaths of all time. Piscopo becomes a zombie too and doesn't remember who his friend is, but then he's reminded of him because of a joke he made about him buying lipstick earlier in the film, which was really lame. They could have done a lot more with the like personally when he buys the lipstick, and it's obviously the like ruby red, like it's too much. How great would it have been for comedic effect if he buys lipstick and he tries to apply it and he goes, and Piscopo went, "You're doing it all wrong," stopped the car and then did like a full makeup session on him to make him look perfect. And he could have just been like he'd be like, "Oh, thanks." And they could have just said nothing, that he's just some expert at applying makeup, and it would have looked perfect. But no, they didn't go there. They went, obviously a little more 80s, a little more homophobic with the jokes. But it wasn't too egregious. But that's what snaps him out of it here. Not that they've been friends for 20 some odd years. It's the joke he made about his lipstick that takes him out of it. But they then go to kill, and they're ready to kill the one bad guy. And his solution was he goes, "Not to me," and he pulls an Uzi in his mouth and blows his own brains out.
Yeah, that I didn't see coming.
And I was like, "What the?" But they were smart. They didn't want to get that X rating, so they didn't show like his brains exploding out of the back of his head. But they then decide, "Nah, punk, that's not how you're going out." So they bring him back to life so they can kill him again. Because they didn't get their revenge, they're going to bring him back to life to kill him. But he's in the machine too long, so he explodes. And then Vincent Price dies when they destroyed the machine, and they walk off into like a misty, hazy light, talking about how they'd like to be reincarnated as the bicycle seat of a woman's bicycle.
It's so fucked up. It's like, okay, this movie is either it's trying to be both a comedy and a over the top kind of body horror gruesome movie. And both of them kind of work against each other. It's always this movie's pulling itself in two different directions, all the way through it.
It was a theatrically released movie. It made just shy of 4 million. I do recommend watching it with friends for sure. Have a couple drinks and then just go, like, if you want to go like, what the fuck? This is a movie that could only exist in the late 80s.
I think you could make it now, but it would end up direct to DVD or dumped on Amazon or Tubi, maybe Shudder if some big director took an interest.
The problem is this had a high enough budget to make it look like it looks like a B movie, but it looks like a B movie theatrical release. Something that now, if they were to make it, would look like garbage on a streaming service, as like shovelware. I don't think, and if somebody wanted to pump the kind of money into this to make it like a real movie like this was, it would have to be toned down to the PG-13. Like, you'd have to have some director with some clout actually make this. Like, you'd have to have a James Gunn or somebody go, "Hey, I want to make this pet project between Marvel movies." And like, you'd have to have somebody have some real pull. So I think somebody could make it now. I don't know if they would. It would have to be somebody that's like a super fan of this. But like, I'm happy I saw. Like, I had never ever heard of this movie before.
I had heard about it because I watch sometimes. There's a free service that's available. I'm pretty sure it's available everywhere in the world. I think it's called Tubi, and I think there's a documentary on there, and I think it's called the 50 Greatest Horror Movies You Have Never Seen. And this came up in there. And I think up until very recently, it was on Shudder. You could watch it there, because I remember putting it in my watch list, or maybe it's on Amazon Prime. But I had heard about this when I heard zombie cop comes back from the dead to avenge his own murder. I immediately thought of like Maniac Cop. But nah, this was a more heroic and less psychotic version. But nah, this was genuinely entertaining. I really liked Treat Williams. I like at the end when he gets out of the body bag and says, "I'm a cop. I need your bike." And he just drives away. And then he's just casually walking through the lab, machine gunning people to death.
You know who the cop was when he says it to?
Who was that?
You're never going to guess.
No.
Okay. It's Shane Black, the director.
What?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Because they worked together on some, productions, right? At one point, or they had people they knew in the same industry. And also, did you catch the name of the company that makes the product?
I did not.
Dante Laboratories.
Oh.
This director, his first 3 or 4 pictures were editing Joe Dante films.
Okay.
So there's little bits and pieces thrown in here too. Little I guess inside jokes for them, because like the average moviegoer in 1988 didn't really know who Joe Dante was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So it's these kind of fun things we find. And I think the biggest surprise, like in the original theatrical trailer, there is not a single scene with Vincent Price. He's not even on the poster, like his name.
Yeah, you only find out that he's in this when you watch the like opening credits, because he's named as this name is so 80s and just it sounds made up. The guy's name is Arthur P. Loudermilk. It sounds like.
And did you notice that Treat Williams is Detective Mortis, as in dead?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ!
So I mean, it's
subtlety is not something that the filmmakers understood.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a fun film, but the best part is it's got 11% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh yeah.
The critics hated it. But yes, definitely worth watching, and this is on Tubi, which is I think owned by Fox. I don't know how much longer it's going to be on Tubi, because I was thinking it was an MGM, like that was the other one. Because anything that's on other services that's MGM might be moving to Amazon, because Amazon now owns MGM. Mm-hmm. But yeah, New World Pictures, all of the Roger Corman stuff is on Tubi, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding it. Dead Heat, and on Tubi it is the Blu-ray remastered copy. So, maybe make it a double feature. Pick out another one. Maybe pick like Return of the Living Dead or something. Pick out another zombie type movie.
Pick out Night of the Comet.
Night of the Comet. There you go.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned Dead in there, because I've mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, and I was going to finish my thought on this one. Okay, so you know how I said this movie ends on a downer ending? Everybody is dead. His Treat Williams' girlfriend is dead. He's dead and has hours left to live. Joe Piscopo has undergone the resurrection process, which means he's on a 12-hour clock too. And at the end of the movie, they walk towards this light, which is, metaphor. And they say, whatever Joe Piscopo's character's name is, I can't remember right now, Doug, I think. He says, "Doug, this is going to be the ending of a beautiful friendship." And then they kind of jokingly go off into the light, and you hear them say, "Hey, maybe I'll get reincarnated as a girl's bicycle seat," or something like that.
And then they laugh, and then it freeze frames.
Yeah, so they die. And I referenced the end of Return of the Living Dead Part 3. And you might be wondering, well, what's the connection there to me? So in Return of the Living Dead Part 3, the movie ends with Melinda Clarke's character. She's undergone the trioxin gas. She is becoming a zombie. She's losing control of who she is. And the character of her boyfriend, I think he gets exposed to the gas or he gets bit. Either way, he's on a clock too. So they, at the end of the movie, they decide to kill themselves together inside this furnace, and they get to die together, go out because they kind of love each other. And that just reminded me of Dead Heat in the regards they're choosing their own way to go out. With Joe Piscopo or Doug and Treat Williams, they're gonna probably enjoy their last hours as friends on Earth having a good time. And on Return of the Living Dead, they're going to spend their last moments together embracing. And just maybe this is me, the artist and the writer, looking into this a little too much, but you can tell a tragic story that has moments of happiness in it. And I think Dead Heat, while it misses the mark at times, is like we've said during our discussion here, with a few trims here and there, some of these scenes could have been really emotional if you let them breathe a touch. And I think this is an example of that. Again, maybe I'm reading too far into it. I mean, but this was a pleasant surprise.
If you took out some of the attempts at comedy, like ultimately I laughed and snickered at the comedy, but I don't think it fits. Like I laughed at the bicycle seat line because I'm like, oh my God, that's the last line of your movie. But and I go, okay, some of the lines would have fit better in like a Farrelly Brothers gross out comedy in the 90s versus this. But you're right, like every scene in this, if it had different music and slightly different dialogue and very slightly different edits, could have been seen as a straight drama horror. But instead they tried to make it more of a comedy. I still like it overall.
Yeah, and I love this movie.
I thought it was good.
So I mean, I say this one's recommended from all of us. I'd say,
yeah, totally.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would. I mean, I'm probably the weakest of all three of us on this, but I still enjoyed it.
I mean,
just know that you may have to pause or fast forward if you've got a queasy stomach at some scenes.
Yeah,
that the Chinese butcher scene is pretty rough.
It's pretty fucked up. I guess like one of the things that we love to do here on the show is examine everything both good and bad. This is one of the rare times where, despite being relics of the era in which they come from, this is a great double bill almost. I mean, if you want to pair these back to back like we did, that works. Another movie that would fit well with this would be, like as Alex mentioned, Return of the Living Dead. I would say Evil Dead Part 2 would definitely work in this vein.
Death Row Game Show.
Yes. Which is a fantastic movie.
Which was basically like The Running Man if it was on bath salts.
Oh, geez. Okay.
It's entertaining.
We'll find a way to get you to watch that sometime because it's
okay.
It's
Arlene and I both love Running Man.
It's out there. It's like, what if the neighbor from Married with Children was a game show host?
Darcy?
Yeah, the boyfriend husband.
Okay.
Not the early one, the later one. The Mr. Smiley Face with big hair. I forget his name.
Yeah.
What if he was a game show host and the game show was just had prisoners and they were all going to be put to death, but they could win their chances out, and basically like Running Man, only
Running Man as if run by the Game Show Network because the budget was so low.
Yeah, and what if instead of the focus being on the prisoners, it was you were following the host around the whole time?
Oh, well, that's weird.
It's so much fun. I was so surprised.
It's so odd. It's like it's hard to describe without watching it, but it would be a good fit for this with the tone of that film.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, great. I guess next week or the next time we have an episode come out, it's we're probably going to be finishing off our 80s buddy cop movie marathon with what was it, Real Men, which you said you've seen, Aaron, before? That's the one.
I have seen Real Men, yeah.
Which Michael and I might be watching in the next couple days.
Yeah, okay.
And the other one that I know we're watching tomorrow is Collision Course, which is the buddy cop movie with Pat Morita and Jay Leno. So I'm not expecting anything horror in it except for maybe the dialogue. And we're expecting a lot of racism from one of them. So
I don't remember Collision Course offhand, but Real Men, that's a strange film. You should appreciate parts of it.
So I imagine we're going to have at least some fun checking those out, and they're probably not super long either. So after that isn't that when you, maybe in the next episode or two, Michael, we wanted to do a didn't you want us to pick a movie from, whose career was it again?
Peter Weller is one I suggested.
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
yeah.
Well, yeah.
I
That's
wouldn't.
easy for me. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind doing something on some of the action heroes, like maybe Charles Bronson. We have talked about.
Pick a random one. Well, yeah, we could do that. We could start picking random actors and let's do a dive into their catalog.
Or here's another idea that I just thought about, because this would be sort of our buddy cop thing that like we've done. I'd love to do something picking another genre. Like, for example, in the 1980s, it was very big to have swords and sandals. Fantasy movies, there was a lot of them, and there was a lot of really bad ones too.
I know.
Dungeon Master. Darlene and I love that movie.
Skull fucking Duggery and shit like
And
that.
Wasn't there is it Darkstalker or something like that?
Yeah. Deathstalker. Yeah.
Deathstalker. Are the rules we can't pick Conan and we can't pick Beastmaster?
You can't pick Conan. You can't pick Beastmaster.
Because those are the two famous ones.
Red Sonja, you wouldn't be able to pick either.
And Red Sonja.
Anything from those series, because those are the ones that people know.
Yeah. So,
Dungeon Master, that's easy.
However, you can pick stuff like a Beastmaster sequel if it doesn't have a lot of stuff around it. So the only cutoff being is you can go as high as 1991 because it may have started production in the 80s.
Okay.
So that's
that looks like something we can look forward to. And I'll one up that as well for another episode at some point. We should pick one of the Indiana Jones / Romancing the Stone knockoffs that happened all throughout the 80s.
Yeah, totally.
Because I showed Michael a few trailers for the two that Sharon Stone did with Richard Chamberlain in the 80s.
And they look so much fun.
And I showed him a trailer for the one, what was it, Firewalker, which is Chuck Norris and Lou Gossett Jr., and it looks hilariously bad.
I have an idea for a genre pick.
Okay.
Child adventure movies from the
Okay.
80s.
Okay. All right.
That would
but
work.
But they can't be like Goonies. They can't, it can't be anything like Monster Squad even. It has to be something fairly unknown, because I can think of 4 or 5 movies right off the bat that fit into that.
Michael and I can probably dive deep into some of the Canadian productions that never made it in the States.
I know a really obscure Australian one that would fit into that actually has a famous name today in it. And I can mention it as a possible pick for it, but Nicole Kidman in BMX Bandits.
Okay, I think I've seen that movie.
She is like 14 in it.
Now, here's a question. Like if we're talking child adventure movies, can the quest be an individual journey of self-discovery? For example, is a movie like Rad or Gleaming the Cube off limits?
I don't know. I wouldn't think so.
Okay, fair enough, because I always wanted to see Rad.
Dude. That movie's so bad.
but I know it's got a really good soundtrack.
Well,
Stan Bush, so sorry.
Well, sort of. It's got a few, yeah.
Oh, so Nicole Kidman was 16 in BMX Bandits.
Oh wow, that is young.
So
that's really.
I almost
old.
feel like that's a genre that came into its own in the 90s.
Yeah, that's what makes it 80s being weird.
Yeah, because like the 90s, I can name like 30 of them. But
oh god, yeah.
But yeah, sure. I mean, that's we got stuff to look forward to in the next couple months for sure. Then.
Exactly. So, guys, once again, thank you for joining us here on Loose Cannon. We are always looking for your suggestions for the show. So if you want to send us an email, you can hit us, both me and Alex, though he does primarily most of the email duties for Twig. And that email address is feedback@thisweekingeek.net. You can also find us at Twitter @thisweekingeek.net. I am Birdman Dodd on Twitter if you want to connect with me personally. Alex is Death Phase Twig. You can just go to the Twig main page and find how to spell that name. Real easy. Aaron is pretty much only available on Facebook, but if you get any feedback for Aaron, we can always pass it along to him via the feedback email address.
Yes, absolutely.
So lots of stuff to talk about on the show as we start coming into the summer months. Just a heads up for a programming note, we will be taking the month of July off, but we will be recording lots of stuff in June to make sure you will always have a fresh set of Friday night rentals for you to enjoy here on Loose Cannon. And eventually we'll have to talk about the Cannon Film Company and each pick a movie from that film company we've never seen.
Man.
So
That'll be fun for me.
The
I
real
like
trick will be there trying to pick a movie that doesn't have Charles Bronson in it.
So
or Chuck Norris. Or Chuck Norris,
or in the late ones, or Van Damme.
So it's going to be a fun time here. So folks, until next time, from us here at the Twig Video Store, we have been
Alex.
I'm Aaron.
So don't forget to pick up your snacks, be kind, rewind, and we'll catch you guys again next time right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net. This has been Loose Cannon.
Are either one of these any good? Sir,
What?
are either one of these any good?
I don't watch movies.
Quick! Change the channel!
You're wasting your life making shit! Nobody cares! These movies are terrible!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
Lower your shields and surrender your listenership. We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.